Humans are peculiar beings. They establish roots in the unlikeliest of places, flourish where conditions argue otherwise, and when confronted with overwhelming odds, they draw strength from the unimaginable. On the distant fringes of inhabited space, the settlement of New Horizon glinted beneath the faint light of a fading star. This outpost world, far removed from Earth's core systems, was little more than a rocky wasteland, yet it had been molded into something else entirely. Beneath its rough surface, a network of tunnels stretched like arteries, housing a small but tenacious community on the orbital station above. Commander Titus Gray stood on the station's observation deck, hands clasped behind him, his gaze fixed on the stars scattered across the darkness. The calm exterior he presented masked the tension building inside. Humanity's enemies, the Coalition, were en route, an alliance of species intent on wiping out humankind. "Commander, we've detected movement." Lieutenant Harris's voice broke the silence from behind, yanking Gray from his reflections. "They've arrived." Gray turned slowly and approached the console. "How many?" "More than anticipated. 5 capital ships, along with 12 escort vessels, estimated to land within 20 minutes. The Coalition hadn't held back, gathering its fiercest warriors for the assault. Gray knew the names well. The Vorn, towering insect-like soldiers with advanced ground strategies. The Seer, amphibians infamous for their vicious space tactics. And the Gad, wielders of formidable energy weapons. Each of these species had felt the sting of humanity's expansion into their territories, and now they sought retribution against even the smallest of Earth's colonies. "We always knew this moment would come," Gray said, his tone calm as he studied the display, which showed the Coalition fleet closing in. Their ships moved into a crescent formation, tightening their hold around the colony. "They think we're easy prey," Harris murmured, casting a glance at Gray, the tension visible in his gaze. A faint smile crossed Gray's lips. "They still don't understand us, Lieutenant. They never have." The colony's defensive measures had been meticulously concealed, lying dormant beneath the surface. From above, New Horizon appeared a quiet outpost with minimal installations, yet below it was a fortified bastion ready for battle. Farmers, miners, and engineers alike were armed and prepared. Civilians had undergone combat training, and drones patrolled the surface in an invisible net of security. "The Coalition won't waste time," Gray continued. "Their first wave will be ground troops, meant to clear us out, followed by orbital bombardment. We wouldn't survive that, Commander," Harris muttered. "That's why we'll ensure they never get the chance." As if in answer, warning sirens blared. The Vorn were initiating their descent, launching pods toward the planet's surface. "Activate surface defenses," Gray ordered. "Brace for impact." Around the colony, hidden turrets hummed to life, their barrels swiveling skyward. Farmers retreated from open fields into fortified bunkers, sealing underground entryways. Gray's eyes flickered to the radar, which tracked the incoming alien pods as they blazed through the atmosphere. "They believe this fight is already won," Gray murmured. "They have no idea what awaits them below." The ground trembled as the first pods landed, detonations rippling through the colony. Dust and debris filled the air, swirling in thick clouds, but the invaders had no time to react. Hidden turrets unleashed a storm of high-velocity rounds, shredding the landing zone. Vorn soldiers emerged, tall, skeletal figures with razor-sharp limbs and multi-jointed arms, only to be cut down before they could even form ranks. Gray activated the comms. "Deploy the drones." From concealed silos, a squadron of combat drones shot into the sky, gliding over the battlefield with lethal precision. Armed with lasers and explosives, they swept through the enemy ranks, sowing chaos among the invaders. Known for their impeccable coordination, the Vorn faltered, their lines breaking as the drones picked them off from above. Inside the command center, Harris exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "They're getting torn apart." Gray's expression remained unreadable, but there was a glint of anticipation in his voice. "This is only the beginning. The real battle is yet to come." He knew the Coalition would retaliate. The Vorn were merely the vanguard. Next would come the Seer and Gad, each equipped with advanced weaponry and strategies. But Gray had planned for every possibility, every strike. As the first wave retreated, Coalition warships repositioned above the planet. Gray noted the shift on his monitors. The enemy was preparing for orbital strikes. "Send the signal to our fleet," Gray ordered. Harris hesitated. "Are you certain, sir? Our fleet still needs hours for full mobilization." Gray's gaze turned steely. "They won't expect us to strike first. Time to show them what humanity's truly capable of." Harris nodded and sent the command. In the asteroid belt, hidden among the rocks, humanity's defense fleet began to stir. Silent and unseen, they crept toward the Coalition's position. The battle was just beginning. Outside, the drones continued their precise strikes, but soon the ground shook from a new arrival. It wasn't another another pod landing, it was the Seer. Emerging from amphibious crafts, they slithered across the terrain with unnerving grace. Their segmented bodies moved like serpents, and their organic armor absorbed the turret's initial assault. Within moments, they were advancing toward the colony's defensive line. "Commander, the Seer are closing in. Our turrets aren't making it through their armor," Harris reported, fingers flying over the controls. Gray's eyes didn't waver from the tactical map. "They've studied our defenses, adapted their tactics, but they won't make it far." He tapped a command on the screen, and all across the battlefield, hidden traps sprang into action. Chasms opened in the rocky terrain, exposing trenches lined with magnetic mines. As the Seer advanced, explosions detonated beneath them, tearing apart their ranks mid-stride. Limbs and fragments of armor flew into the air, but the creatures pressed forward, more spilling onto the battlefield. "They're still coming," Harris said through gritted teeth, frustration lacing his voice. Gray remained silent, his mind calculating every move. The Vorn had been dismantled, and the Seer were charging headfirst into deadly traps. But he knew the coalition wasn't finished. They were holding back, which could only mean one thing. The Gad were setting up something massive, something that New Horizons surface defenses couldn't counter. A low rumble reverberated through the station, causing the lights to flicker. Gray's eyes snapped to the monitor as a new reading appeared. "Energy spike detected," Harris shouted. "Gad vessel deploying a massive energy weapon. Power levels are spiking, it's targeting us." Gray's pulse quickened, but his voice stayed steady. "They're planning a direct assault. They're aiming to obliterate us before our fleet can intervene." The Gad were infamous for their energy-based weaponry, and now they were committing their trump card, a high-powered beam that could turn settlements into scorched earth in seconds. "We have minutes at best," Harris stammered, sweat beading on his brow. "Then let's make sure they pay for it," Gray replied, eyes narrowing with determination. He activated the colony-wide comms. "Attention all civilians, prepare for impact. Move to the deep bunkers. Defensive teams, fall back to phase 2 positions. We need to draw them in closer." The colony's defenses shifted per his orders. Gray's mind worked through every possible outcome. The Gad's weapon would reduce the surface to ashes, but the bunkers below were designed for precisely this situation, built to withstand a blast of this magnitude. The challenge would be striking back swiftly before the coalition could regroup. "Commander, should we deploy the planetary shields?" Harris asked, hope flickering in his voice. Gray shook his head. "Not yet." A glimmer of understanding crossed Harris's face. "We'll use it against them, won't we?" A faint smile curved Gray's lips. "They'll drain their reserves firing that weapon. We'll strike while they're exposed." Time slowed as the energy readings climbed to critical levels. The orbital platform seemed to hold its breath, bracing for the inevitable. Then, the sky over New Horizon erupted in light. A searing white beam rained down, obliterating the surface. The ground trembled violently, molten debris burst skyward, and the colony's outer defenses were vaporized in a flash. Harris shielded his eyes from the blinding brilliance, a chill of dread filling him. "The surface, it's gone." Gray's voice cut through the fear. "Focus. The surface was a diversion. The colony still stands below." As the energy beam faded, leaving a smoking crater behind, Gray's gaze sharpened on the tactical screen. The Gad ships hovered, their reserves depleted. Now, he commanded, "Launch the counterattack." Out of the asteroid belt, humanity's strike fleet surged forward, camouflaged by the depths of space. Their dark hulls stayed invisible against the stars until they were upon the coalition fleet. Then, in a ruthless barrage, missiles and railguns unleashed devastation upon the Gad vessels. Caught off guard, their shields weakened from the energy discharge. The Gad ships crumbled under the onslaught, unable to withstand the retaliatory fury. The battle had shifted. One by one, the coalition's massive ships detonated, scattering debris across New Horizons' orbit. Direct hits on all Gad ships, Harris reported, satisfaction sharpening his tone. "They're falling apart out there." Gray's expression remained impassive. "Keep up the pressure. Don't give them a chance to regroup. Focus on their command ship." As the coalition forces scrambled in disarray, the Seer and Vorn on the ground were thrown into chaos, their coordination shattered with the loss of their orbital command. Meanwhile, the human fleet tightened its formation, pressing the advantage relentlessly. The battle's tide was shifting, yet Gray knew better than to relax. "They'll retreat," he murmured to himself, "but not far. They'll regroup and return stronger." The colony had survived the initial onslaught, but the war was far from over. The coalition had launched their first strike. Now it was humanity's turn to take the offensive. "Prepare to launch the ground offensive," Gray ordered. Gray descended to the colony colony's subterranean command center, where smoke from the recent bombardment still lingered in the air. In the fortified bunkers, civilians huddled together, having withstood the brutal assault. For now, they were safe, but Gray's mind was already focused on what lay ahead. In the war room, Gray's top officers were gathered around a holographic table, displaying the coalition's remaining forces. The Seer and Vorn fleets had regrouped beyond the outer moon, nursing their wounds from the destruction of the Gad vessels. "They'll be back with reinforcements," remarked Captain Rohr, one of Gray's senior officers. His voice was taut with frustration. "We barely survived the first wave." Gray folded his arms, his gaze hard. "They think they have us on the ropes. That's exactly what we want them to believe." Rohr frowned. "Sir, we can't hold out forever. The Seer have thousands of soldiers, and the Vorn, they'll keep throwing numbers at us," finished Harris. "We're bound to be overrun. They won't get that chance," Gray said, leaning over the table, eyes fixed on the holographic map. "We're not waiting for another attack. We're taking the fight to them." Silence fell as the officers exchanged uncertain glances. Rayner, one of the younger lieutenants, finally spoke up. "You want to attack them? With what?" "With everything we have." Gray straightened, his eyes blazing. "We've been on the defensive long enough. The coalition sees us as prey. Let's show them what happens when prey fights back." The officers nodded, their expressions hardening with resolve. This was the direction they needed, a clear, decisive counterstrike. "We'll launch a surgical strike on their command ships," Gray continued, tapping the map. "Target their leadership and disrupt their coordination. The coalition's strength lies in their unity. We cut the head off the snake, and the body will collapse." The command center buzzed with renewed vigor as Gray's plan ignited a sense of purpose among his team. He knew the coalition wouldn't anticipate such an audacious response from a colony they believed to be barely hanging on. "Captain Rohr," Gray commanded, "ready our strike teams. We're about to hit them where it hurts." Rohr nodded, determination stealing his face. The real battle was only beginning. "Strike teams will be ready within the hour, sir," Rohr confirmed, his voice steady. Gray turned to Harris, who was poised by the communication array. "Relay the order to the fleet. We'll deploy in successive waves. Our ground forces will hold, prepared for direct insertion the moment their command structure is compromised." Harris's fingers flew over the console. "Message sent, sir," Gray observed as the holographic display shifted, showing the coalition fleet clustered near the moon's orbit. The Vorn capital ships were positioned in a defensive ring around the command vessels, with Seer frigates patrolling the perimeter. They appeared formidable, but Gray knew the coalition's Achilles heel. Their strategy had always relied on sheer numbers, confident no adversary could withstand such an onslaught. "They're afraid," Gray muttered. "They've never faced resistance like this." Minutes later, the human fleet began its approach. The ships moved in tight formations, using the asteroid field as cover, silently advancing toward the coalition's perimeter. "Strike one, engage," Gray commanded. The first wave of human ships emerged from the asteroid cover, missiles already locked onto targets. They unleashed a relentless barrage, the projectiles slicing through space toward the closest Vorn cruiser. Its shields activated, but it was too late. The missile barrage shredded through, ripping the cruiser apart in a burst of fire and debris. Gray's gaze didn't waver. "Strike two, proceed." The second wave surged forward, zeroing in on the coalition's command vessel, a colossal Seer dreadnought bristling with weapons. The coalition forces scrambled to retaliate, but the surprise attack had left them in disarray. Inside the human ships, soldiers secured their gear, readying for the next phase. Rayner's voice crackled through the comms. "Ground forces standing by for deployment." Gray nodded, his expression steely. "Launch the dropships. Hit them hard and fast." On board the human vessels, cargo bays opened, releasing a fleet of dropships that streaked toward the moon's surface. Each carried elite ground units, hardened soldiers who had watched their worlds ravaged by the coalition's relentless expansion. They were determined to make this battle count. Rayner's voice broke through again. "Sir, dropships are en route. We'll hit the surface in 10 minutes." Gray shifted his focus back to the fight above. The coalition's fleet had begun to regroup, their capital ships retaliating with beams of energy and plasma bursts. A human frigate took a direct hit, exploding in a brilliant flash, but the rest of the fleet pressed onward, hammering through the coalition's defenses with unrelenting force. "They're breaking," Harris said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "Good," Gray replied, his tone cold. "Keep pressing. Don't give them a moment to recover." Down on the moon's surface, the first wave of human ground troops made landfall. Dust and smoke billowed as the drop ships touched down, releasing squads of soldiers into the battlefield. The coalition's ground forces, already on high alert, scrambled to meet the sudden assault but hadn't anticipated such a direct strike. The human soldiers poured out, relentless and focused, charging headlong into the coalition's defensive lines. The Vorn and Seer troops scrambled to hold their lines as waves of human soldiers poured from the drop ships, weapons blazing. Leading the charge, Raynor's boots hit the rocky surface hard. He motioned to his squad, and they fanned out, advancing swiftly and firing suppressive rounds that kept the alien defenders pinned in place. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burning plasma, punctuated by the anguished cries of the wounded and dying. "They're entrenched tight," one of Raynor's men shouted over the gunfire. "We don't have time for a standoff," Raynor growled. "Push forward. We need to hit their command center before they can regroup." The human squads advanced with brutal precision, covering each other as they wove through the maze of alien structures. The towering Vorn, despite their size and multi-jointed limbs, struggled against the humans' relentless tactics. Each fallen alien pushed the humans forward, faster and harder. Above, the orbital battle raged. "Commander, they're starting to break," Harris called, his voice alive with adrenaline. "Their command ship's shields are collapsing." "End it," Gray ordered, his tone icy and controlled. The human fleet closed in, unleashing their full arsenal on the coalition's dreadnought. Explosions riddled its hull, culminating in a massive fireball that illuminated the battlefield. Gray allowed himself a brief flash of satisfaction. With the coalition's command ship obliterated, their fleet's cohesion would shatter. All that remained was to strike their ground leadership. Down on the moon's surface, Rohr and his team reached the coalition's command center, a massive structure carved into the rocky landscape, fortified with heavy artillery and a battalion of alien defenders. "We've reached the target," Rohr panted, ducking as enemy fire rained down around him. Gray's voice cut through the comms, steady and resolute. "Take it down, Captain. Let's finish this." Rohr signaled to his team. "All units, target the command center. Bring it down." They unleashed a relentless assault, combining explosives and concentrated fire. The coalition defenders tried desperately to hold their ground, but the sheer force of the human attack overwhelmed them. Within minutes, the command center's defenses crumbled, and the structure itself buckled under the barrage, collapsing in a storm of dust and debris. As the dust settled, Rohr rose, his breaths coming heavy. The battlefield around him was a graveyard of alien bodies and smoldering remains. The coalition's leadership was decimated, their fleet destroyed, their forces in disarray. "Commander, the moon is secure," Rohr reported. "Excellent work, Captain," Gray replied. "They'll remember this day. The battle was over. Humanity hadn't just survived. It had struck back with a force that would reverberate throughout the galaxy. The coalition had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price." Gray stood in the command center, gazing out at the stars. The war was far from over, but today humanity had